Have you ever wondered what the driest place on Earth is? Well, there's actually two possibilities, although I do think that one of them is probably drier than the other. But it partially depends on how you define the driest place on Earth. Usually, it's defined as the place that gets the least amount of rain. And there is at least one place on Earth that hasn't gotten any rain, scientists believe, for at least 2 million years. Any idea where that place may be? Well, before I tell you where that place is, let me tell you about the other candidate for the driest place on Earth. The other place that could be the driest place on Earth is the Atacama Desert. The Atacama Desert is a desert located in Chile, and it is definitely very dry, but it does get some rainfall. On average, it rains once every 5 or 10 years in this desert. And there are indeed some places in this desert where there has never been any recorded rainfall. On average, the entire Atacama Desert gets about 15 milliliters of rainfall per year, or zero point 0.6 inches. In other words, very little. Now, that's an average amount. There are parts of this desert that get more and parts that get less. But on average, it gets just 15 milliliters of rain per year, and it often goes several years without any rain at all. And there are some sources that will say that the Atacama Desert is the driest place on Earth. What's interesting about the Atacama Desert is there actually are people that live here. In fact, about 1 million people live in the Atacama Desert. And there is economic activity here as well. For example, there is lithium mining that occurs in the Atacama Desert. But there is one place on Earth that, in my opinion, is even drier. And that place is also a very cold place. And that place is actually the McMurdo Dry Valleys, which is actually located in Antarctica. Unlike the Atacama Desert in Chile, there's nobody that lives year round in the dry valleys of Antarctica because it's in Antarctica. Now, a lot of people don't realize this, but the Antarctic desert is actually the largest desert in the world. The two largest deserts in the world are the Antarctic desert and the Arctic desert. So people think the largest desert in the world is the Sahara Desert. Well, the Sahara Desert is the third largest desert in the world and the largest hot desert. But the thing about Antarctica is there's very little snow and very little rain in Antarctica. And because of the low amount of snow and rain, Antarctica is actually a desert. In fact, it's the world's largest desert. Now, most of Antarctica is covered in a sheet of ice, but the McMurdo Dry Valley is not. And unlike the Atacama Desert in Chile, there is absolutely no rain at all in the McMurdo Dry Valleys. In fact, scientists think that there hasn't been any rain here for perhaps 2 million years or longer. So I would argue that this is probably the driest place on Earth. At most, I would say the Atacama Desert might be equally as dry. Now, there is some precipitation. For the most part, there is very little snow in the McMurdo Dry Valley, but there is a little bit of snow. On average, there's 100 milliliters of snowfall per year, compared to 15 milliliters of rainfall in the Atacama Desert. However, as a rule of thumb, 1 inch or milliliter of rain has 10 times as much water as 1 inch or milliliter of snow does. Now, it actually does depend on the type of snow, but that's a general rule of thumb, which means that 15 milliliters of rain would be about 50% more water than 100 milliliters of snow. So if you compare the amount of water it gets from precipitation, I would actually say that the McMurdo Dry Valley is still drier than the Atacama Desert. In addition to that, what makes this area so dry are these strong catabolic winds that are constantly blowing. And they blow so hard that any snow that does fall to the ground is quickly swept away and made into water vapor through the process of sublimation. These dry catabolic winds can blow very hard and fast, and they have been clocked, some of them at 200 miles per hour. So, nearly all of the snow that does end up reaching the ground doesn't really have a chance to absorb into the soil. That stated, there are some bodies of water in the McMurdo Dry Valleys. There are several permanently ice covered lakes in this area. These lakes have a solid ice layer on top of them that range from about 3 to 5 meters thick, or 9.8 feet to 16.4 feet thick. And some of these lakes are actually freshwater lakes. Others are actually extremely saline water. In fact, one of the lakes is the second most saline or second saltiest lake on Earth. There is microbial life that lives in these lakes. Both the Atacama Desert and the McMurdo Dry Valleys have been said to be the closest you can come to what it would be like being on the surface on Mars while still being on Earth. I would actually say the McMurdo Dry Valleys are a little bit closer to what it's like on Mars because the McMurdo Dry Valleys are colder. However, the McMurdo Dry Valleys are not as cold as Mars, and neither the Atacama Desert or the McMurdo Dry Valley is exactly like Mars, but they are said to come about as close as you can get while still being on Earth to what it would be like to be on Mars. So let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think that the Atacama Desert in Chile or the McMurdo Dry Valleys in Antarctica are the driest places on Earth? Or maybe you think they're tied. Let me know. I also want to dedicate this video to Lena, aka Lollipop. She just went through a very challenging episode in her life, but she has overcome this challenge, and I'm very proud of you, Lena. Thanks very much to my Patreon producer, Lena, aka Lollipop, and my Patreon associate producer, Jamie Joy. If you like this video, give it a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel, click the bell icon for notifications, and select all notifications. It really helps me out when you select all notifications. You can also catch me on Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter at Zorkbid123.